Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Let's talk poop. In 2006, the readers of the British Medical Journal, an august journal read by lots of doctors, were asked to vote for the biggest medical advance of the last 200 years. Now, if you think about it, they had quite a lot to choose from. They had the pill, they had anesthesia, they had general surgery, and they chose the toilet. Not necessarily this toilet, which is at the World Toilet Organization event in Bangkok. You'll be hearing about that from Jack Sim shortly. But they knew that the toilet has added about 20 years to the lifespan of everybody in this room. It has eradicated disease. It's a magic device. And so that's why they chose it as the best medical advance of the last 250 years. However, in 2012, that's not the whole story of the toilet. And I'm going to introduce you this evening to the story of something that you're all familiar with. Maybe you've done it once or twice or 3 times a day. I'm not privy to your bowel movements. But crap, doo-doo, poop, caca, shit. Sorry for any school children in the audience. We all do it. We all think about it. We just don't talk about it. And that's having a really damaging effect on all sorts of things. But it's also a fascinating subject and substance because shit can be fuel and fertilizer. It can cook your food. It can heat your house. It can switch your lights on. But it's also a weapon of mass destruction. For most people, a toilet looks something like this. For 4 out of 10 people in the world's population, when Steve told you that most people don't have sanitation, I just want to clarify exactly what that means. That means they don't even have a plastic bag. They don't even have a bucket or a box. They certainly don't have a room. They certainly don't have a clean toilet and a lockable door and privacy and dignity. They generally have something like this. This little boy is doing his business as he has to do every day on the expressway. It's the airport expressway in Mumbai in India. And I'm sure many of you watched the film Slumdog Millionaire and are familiar with that famous toilet scene where entrepreneurship goes a little bit wrong. That is actually a luxury toilet in most slums. Most slums have no toilet whatsoever. I've been to slums where there were 40,000 people and 10 public toilet seats. All those 10 toilet seats are luxury. Now, why does that matter? Well, that's an awful lot of poop lying around the world. In India alone, which has a population of 1 billion people, 750 million people are doing what's called open defecation. Poop is a weapon of mass destruction. It's a very good weapon of mass destruction. Lots of diseases love to travel in it. Lots of worms love to travel in it. The world's worm burden, as it's known, is extremely heavy. 1 gram of poop can contain 1,000 parasite cysts, 10 million viruses, 1 million bacteria. It can contain all sorts of nasties, and it likes to travel. Let's just imagine that little boy pooping by the roadside in Mumbai. He wasn't wearing shoes, you may have noticed, so he's going to run back into his house. At some point, he's going to have some food. He probably doesn't have anywhere to wash his hands. He probably doesn't have soap. He's going to be covered in fecal particles. That's tiny grams of little micro particles of poop are going to be under his fingernails, on his fingers, on his feet. He's going to be tramping them into his household, sticking his fingers in the family rice pot. At some point, he's going to be ingesting them. They're going to go into his food and his water. And when we talk about water-related diseases or dirty water or contaminated water, let's be clear what we're talking about. We're talking about shit-related disease because it is fecally contaminated water and it is fecally contaminated food, and it causes all sorts of trouble. In the West, in the industrialized world, in what I call the flushed and plumbed societies, for most of us, diarrhea is something banal. It's something we get from a bad kebab. And when I was at the World Water Forum in Istanbul, I had to change this slide, and I'm sorry, Americans, but I changed it to a hamburger. So it's something that's really banal. It comes and goes in a couple of days. We ignore it. We have maybe a runny tummy. We call it the squits, the squirts, the runs. In England, we call it deli belly. That's the empire for you. But But in fact, diarrhea is the second biggest killer of children in the world. Let me say that again, because I think that is profoundly shocking. It is the second biggest killer of children under 5 in the world. It kills more children. Remember, the squirts, that banal, ridiculous thing that you've just been laughing about a minute ago, kills more children than HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and measles put together. Every 15 seconds, a child dies from the squirts. And yes, it's an extremely preventable disease. These are cholera beds in Haiti. We only generally hear about diarrhea and the diseases caused by feces when it's a mass epidemic like cholera, then it comes into the news. But the chronic problem of diarrhea is not mass epidemics generally. It's a child in a village in Mozambique who's died this morning. It's another one in Bangladesh who's going to die this evening. 50% of beds, as we just heard, are filled with shit-related diseases. That's a huge burden on most governments. In sub-Saharan Africa, 50% of beds in sub-Saharan Africa. Every 2 hours, 1 plane load of children dies from diarrhea. I'm banging this point home because I think it's not well understood. And it's not just a problem in the poor world, it's not just a problem in the sanitation-less world, it's a problem in the flushed and plumb societies like ours. I'm not sure where this particular beach is, but it could be here, why not? You have a nice wastewater treatment plant in Seattle, but Victoria, BC doesn't have one. Victoria, BC is discharging its sewage into the Sound every single day, and it doesn't take much to understand that currents are currents, and they move. Actually, one of the downsides of writing a book about poop is that you think twice before swimming in the ocean. This is a beach closed by sewage contamination. Sewage is actually the biggest marine pollutant on the planet. In the developing world, 90% of it is discharged raw into watercourses, but it's not just in the developing world. In New York alone, they discharge 800 Olympic-sized swimming pools of raw sewage into their waters every single week. Why? Because our sewer systems are old. They're 150 years old in many cases. In New York, they are particularly. London as well. Londons were built in the 19th century by a fantastic man called Joseph Basil Jett. He thought ahead, he put in 25% extra capacity, and we're still overflowing. And it just takes a short, sharp rainstorm. That's pretty appropriate as we're in Seattle, which is like home. Sewers are immediately overloaded, and they can do nothing else but discharge it because there's just too much volume. This is Grace. She's 23 years old. She's in Liberia. She's still a schoolgirl. She missed out on school because of the civil war in Liberia. I'm going to use Grace to introduce you to the benefits of sanitation and all it can do for us. Having a toilet can put you back in school. 11 to 20% of school children, particularly schoolgirls, drop out of school because they don't have anywhere private to go. If you're menstruating, you've got your period every month, and you have nowhere to go for the bush, I'd drop out of school too. Put in a good toilet, put in hand-washing facilities, neither of which have been installed in this nice new school that Grace goes to because the NGO gave up before putting in sanitation because they didn't think it was a problem. And you get 20% of school children back in school. Those girls are going to grow up, be productive, earn money. They're going to trigger development. Putting in a latrine, a good latrine, eradicates 40% of disease. Putting in a clean water supply eradicates about 20%. I'm not saying we shouldn't put in clean water supplies, of course not. But in fact, if you look at water and sanitation budgets, they're generally small in the first place, but 90% of most water and sanitation budgets go to water, which is why sanitation is generally known as and sanitation. And yet, it's the most cost-effective health prevention mechanism we have. If you invest $1 in sanitation, you will save $8 in those hospital beds that you're not going to be using, in people who are going to be back in work, going to be productive, in the children who are going to be in school and grow up to be productive. It can do all these things for you. It's going to earn you money. Shit is gold. And if that's not enough for you, it can also get you a good sex life. Because in India, there's now a wonderful campaign which has been dubbed by some as No Loo, No I Do. And the idea is that if you don't have a toilet, that brides will not marry into families without toilets. And that sounds like fantastic propaganda, but it's actually true. I have actually met a girl, she was called Giti, and she had left her husband, which is no small matter when you live in rural India. She had left her husband, and she had come home because her husband's family did not have a toilet, but were using the village pond as their toilet. They were also using it for drinking water, and their cows were drinking from it too. And that was standard. What else can poop do for you? Sanitation can also cook your food. This is a prison in Rwanda. Rwanda has a lot of prisons because of historical reasons. It's got a lot of genocidal murderers too in prison. And in Rwanda, 10 out of 12 prisons get 75% of their cooking fuel from the contents of their prisoners' latrines. So these are a bunch of prisoners, mass murderers, most of them, stirring poop in a prison in Butare in Rwanda. And they're saving $1 million a year in firewood that they're not using. It's free, it's infinite, you're never going to run out of it. And it's a fantastic scheme. The other thing that poop can do for you in the flushed and plumbed world is it can save your life, even here. This is an operating theater in Brooklyn, New York. That woman is about to be, and I'm sorry if you've just had food, that woman, that brown stuff in the bottle is what you think it is. Mixed with saline. It's been mixed with a dipper. They were using a blender, but they found that a swizzle stick worked just as well. So the surgeon is about to take that tube he's got with the light on it and transfuse a dose of healthy poop into this woman. Why? Because she's been suffering for years from a superbug called Clostridium difficile, C. diff. She's tried all sorts of medicines, nothing shifted it. The bacteria that we carry in our system, in our gut, we have good bacteria and bad bacteria. Hers is all out of kilter. So she needs, the idea is, she just gets a dose of healthy bacteria from, well, the easiest way to do it is just get someone to give you some poop. Sometimes it's a relative. I don't know how you go about asking your relative to do that, but I haven't tried. But you can also get donors who do it. This is actually a donor stool sample, so you get screened, and then you eat the right stuff, and then you get to a toilet. And the cure rate is 91%. And yet, hardly any gastroenterologists will countenance doing this procedure because they think it's disgusting. I admit that in the early days of this procedure, they were doing it with a nasal tube, and I do agree that that's a little bit much. But they've now perfected it, and it has an amazing success rate, and yet it's ignored because it's poop. Is it always like this all over the world? Are we all afraid of talking about poop? Okay, I'm talking about it a lot, but no, it's not. There are countries which treat it very differently. Japan, for example. 60 years ago, Japan was a nation of pit latrines. They used sticks and paper, and now they're a nation of what's known as a washlet. If you've ever been to Japan, you'll have had the same experience of finding this toilet with this funny thing in the middle of it and a remote control device, and you've probably pressed the wrong button and you'll have got soaking wet. I actually have one of these in my house, and they are fantastic. They have automatic lid-raising facility, which is known as the marriage saver. But more importantly, they use very low water levels. Well, we can get into a toilet paper argument afterwards if anyone wants to come and discuss anal cleansing methods. But they clean you with an inbuilt bidet nozzle, which has been carefully calibrated to 43 degrees. Some of that research was done in a strip club, apparently, to gauge the distances. Anyway, I won't go into that. But now there are more washlets than computers in Japan because the toilet in Japan has become a talkable item. If you go into a department store in Japan, an electrical department store, you will see displays of toilet seats, electrical toilet seats. It's just an item like any other household item. You upgrade it, you value it, you prize it, and that doesn't happen here. Here, for example, in the US and in the UK, the toilet is what is known as a distressed purchase. You only buy a new one when it breaks down. That's not where the toilet should be for such an amazing device. It should be more in our consciousness. We should be talking about toilets. China is another place where they fully understand the value of poop. They've been putting it on the fields for 4,000 years. Good reason not to have salads in China. And this is Chuanjiang. I'm sorry for any Chinese speakers. I've probably just said North Korea or something. But anyway, he was in the 1950s. He was elevated to the status of a national hero. He was given a national award, and he is carrying on his back a bucket of poop. He was a night soil carrier. He became a friend of Chairman Mao, and he was just a hero like any other. This is Mrs. Che, also in China. She's also got her own biogas, that's a biogas rice cooker and her biogas gas ring. And now in China, 18 million households have a household biogas digester, which is connected to their latrine. It's better for rural families because you need a certain volume, so the ideal is to have a few pigs. 3 is about the right number. But now 18 million or so households in China are using biogas. She can cook with it. Her light is powered with it. And she doesn't see anything wrong with it. She's very proudly just told me that it doesn't smell. She's lit it to show that it doesn't blow up. And she's absolutely ecstatic about it because she's not getting firewood anymore. She's not contributing to deforestation. She doesn't have to cook with rice stalks so she doesn't get respiratory problems. It's just a perfect solution. It wasn't always the way in our countries, too. It's only been in the last 300 years that we've shoved the toilet out of sight and out of mind. It's actually the fault of the toilet, because it was so cleverly designed that you didn't have any smell, so you could have it in your house. Once we put it behind a locked door, then we had no reason to talk about it. This is a public bathroom in Rome from about 2,000 years ago, and as you can see, it was quite public. It's not that that the doors have not survived. There were no doors. You went to your bathhouse, and it was conversational and sociable, and you went to the toilet, and it was conversational and sociable. It was not a shameful thing to do. It was just a necessary activity. Now, I'm not saying we should all immediately go and set up family latrines or family toilets, although I have to say, American toilet stalls, you've got these big gaps down the doors. It's pretty much the same thing. But it was talkable. It was not a source of shame. In the 19th century, you can find these fantastic documents, because that was when the sewer system was being installed, and they were talking about it in government. And you can find all these. They were known as sewage doctors, eminent Victorian engineers who saw nothing wrong with putting together these amazing schemes for sewage farms and all sorts of sewage gas taps where sewage would emerge. And you don't want to know. It's a bit complicated. But Karl Marx quite happily talked about it. All sorts of eminent engineers talked about it, and there was no problem. How are we going to make the toilet talkable? Well, one solution is a celebrity. This, of course, is a genuine photo. Genuine with the use of Photoshop. It's going to help if, a celebrity can't hurt. But it's such a neglected topic that it's not going to do any harm. And in fact, Matt Damon already is very active in clean water supply and also talks about sanitation and toilets. I think these are really exciting times, not just because of this Reinventing the Toilet challenge, which is great. For me, the biggest boon in the Reinventing the Toilet is that it's making the toilet a legitimate topic of discussion. If the Gates Foundation can talk about it, then anyone can talk about it. We have the president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Nobel Peace Prize winner, writing about toilets, and not about clean water supply, but specifically toilets in the pages of the New York Times. Unheard of. That's new. I think things are changing, and I'm really optimistic, quite impatiently optimistic. Gates Foundation, they're impatient optimists. I think things are going to change, and I think in the next 5 years are going to be really, really interesting times. And I hope that in 5 years, I'll be standing on a stage somewhere talking about how the toilet is so banal it doesn't even need to be talked about because we're all talking about it too much. Sanitation, Gandhi said, was more important than independence. That's Gandhi, the father of Indian independence. And he was right, and I think it's time that we brought it back to its rightful place, which is, okay, behind a locked door, but in the forefront of our mind, and so we can talk about it and stop people dying, children dying, from something as ridiculous and banal as diarrhea. Thank you.